In a windswept corner of Syria, a so-called safe zone, and 80,000 people surviving in tattered tents, a desert of human misery, victims of Syria's 7-year war. A safe zone, or at least it's meant to be. But the Jordanian military pilot who took us in wouldn't fly over it. No government controls it. Aid agencies can't get to it. And the ISIS fighters these people fled from are inside it. 4,000 of them.
As we welcome you back, that was a portion of a report from NBC Nightly News earlier this week about the Rukban refugee camp on the border of Syria and Jordan. As you heard in the report, about 80,000 people there, about 4,000 of those believed to be affiliated with ISIS. And therein is a major problem with a refugee camp, a safe zone. Now, something we need to point out, because here on this side of the globe, we talk about the Middle East and we recognize broad themes, but really don't recognize all of the players involved, all of the factors involved. Yes, you have that dangerous situation in that safe zone, in that refugee camp on the Jordanian-Syrian border. But what of other situations that exist in Iraq? Problems throughout the Middle East. To really get a reality check on what is going on, I could think of no one better to join us than our next guest, who comes to us via Skype. He's the Shillman Fellow for the Clarion Project. Ryan Mauro returns to Newsmax TV. Ryan, we very much appreciate your time on this Friday.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, Ryan, we saw a portion of that NBC Nightly News report about what is happening on the Syrian border with Jordan. What I noticed in my visit to Amman, the formal name of the country we call Jordan is the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. And I mention that not to be a smart aleck, but to point out that sovereignty quite often is trumped by tribalism and by religious beliefs in the Middle East and by ethnicities. For example, you and I have had the chance to speak with a refugee from Iran who happens to be a Kurd by the name of Mohammed Alizadeh, who has converted to Christianity. And in fact, your interview with Mohammed spiked our interest and sparked our interest. We had a chance to talk with him as well. I want to listen again to Mohammed Alizadeh in his own words about the challenges he faces in East Kurdistan as a Kurd dealing with the strife that exists between Iraq and Iran, about the fate of his own people, about what he champions in terms of freedom to practice his own faith. Let's listen to that, and then we'll talk more about Mohammed and more broadly speaking about what is going on today in the Middle East. Let's listen to Mohammed Alizadeh.
Kurds just wanted freedom and independence, but don't have a problem with another religion, but also another nation. Kurds in Iran want democracy for all people and all Iran, and federalism for Kurds.
Now you have a situation with so many Christian refugees. Are the Kurds and the Christians, regardless of ethnicity, there in your part of the world, are you folks literally fighting for survival?
It's different because also I'm telling you because I remember from Kurdish opposition. First time I'm working for freedom of my nation because I believe in my nation, believe in my party, but also my party. I love the democracy and freedom of religion.
And Ryan, we listened to Mohammed Alizadeh and his situation as a Christian and a Kurd, and I didn't even get around to Turkey and the historic hostility between the Turks and the Kurds. This really is a power keg. We've got about 10 minutes. Can you unpack the different situations, the different interactions, the different threats that exist from region to region in the Middle East with reference to refugees, Christians, and those who may be in some of these refugee camps or these, quote, safe zones?
Sure. Well, overall, what you're looking at are a lot of pools of gasoline and a lot of matches. So as bad as things are in the Middle East right now, any second you could have another inflammation that happens, and then we're dealing with a new conflict. So that's why you have to handle these things so delicately. But as for the situation with the refugees, I spent time in the destroyed Christian areas of Iraq as well as in the Kurdish areas, and I was really struck by how pro-American both those areas are. The Christians you would assume would be so, but the Kurds, just your average conversation is about secular democracy, being an example for how Islam should be practiced in the region. And they had no hostility that I came across to Christians, but then some Christians say that they have encountered hostility. So how do you handle all of that? You have Mohammed Alizadeh's conversation where he says, as a convert from Islam to Christianity, the top target for jihadists, he feels safe and protected in Iraqi Kurdistan. So I would say backing an independent Kurdistan is the right strategic move, even though it would bother countries in the area. But these are countries that don't like us anymore. That includes Turkey, a member of NATO. So I'm pro-Kurd that way. When it comes to the persecution of Christians and Yazidis and the refugees in that area of Iraq, which is next to and also includes Iraqi Kurdistan, we are advocating a safe zone. We have a new film out called Faith Keepers, all about the persecution of these minorities in the region. It's a very powerful film, and the organizations we work with and people on the ground in Iraq say a small safe zone for the Christians and the Yazidis in Iraq is the way to go. It's something we've done in the past and something we can do again. So I would say those are the two strategic moves we can do now. Syria, a much messier place, but Trump did the right thing by sending arms to the Kurds in Syria, despite the protests of Turkey, which, again, despite being a member of NATO, is actually an adversary of the United States. And I would go so far as to say that Turkey is in a state of proxy war against us right now. You have a proxy war within NATO.
Wow. Well, and this is making news today, Ryan Mauro, exactly why we wanted to have you on, because Turkey, when you think about it historically, Kemal Ataturk really bringing forth the first secular republic within the Islamic world, but now Erdogan doing a 180, continued ethnic strife, targeting the Kurds, but also an embrace, it would appear to many of us, of Islamic extremism. And you're saying, in essence, there is a proxy war being perpetrated by Turkey against the United States and our other allies.
100%. Turkey is backing jihadists within Syria, often operating under the banner of the Free Syrian Army, who originally had some good elements, and there might still be good elements in there. But the jihadists that are carrying that banner right now are backed by Turkey. So Turkey's active on the ground there, fighting against our allies in Syria. And then they're more overtly bombing our allies in both Iraq and in Syria, the Kurds. And more broadly, this is an ideological war. So put the military stuff aside for a moment. Is Turkey furthering the ideology of radical Islam around the world, not just the Middle East? The answer is 100% yes. So I would say they do not belong in NATO. If you go to the NATO website, it says that as part of the mission statement that NATO members are supposed to pursue the collective security of all the members, and they're supposed to promote democratic values. Turkey does neither of those things. So Turkey does not belong in the alliance. And it's such a painful pill to swallow that people don't want to admit it. And they keep saying, well, there must be some way we can work this out. No, you can't. When it comes to the fight against the ideology of radical Islam, I am more concerned about Erdogan than I am the leader of ISIS.
Wow. Well, this is exactly why we appreciate your comments, Ryan Mauro, a Shillman Fellow for the Clarion Project. So you've offered a clarion call to, at the very least, reassess our relationship with Turkey. But let's return to the original point upon which this conversation started. We began with a clip of a report from NBC Nightly News dealing with that Rukban safe zone, refugee camp, there on the Jordanian-Syrian border, and yet there is a significant ISIS presence in that particular, quote, safe zone. So I realized this may be a comparison apples to oranges. And you talked about the volatility of what is happening on the border of Syria and Jordan, and what has happened with some of the, quote, free Syrian fighters in days past. But is there any guarantee? Safe zones in Iraq, the safe zones you are trying to set up, is there a way to keep ISIS and Al-Qaeda infiltrators out of those safe zones?
There will never be a guarantee of that. There's always a way to break into anywhere. As for them becoming a base for ISIS or terrorists, I would say that, yes, you can guarantee something. That's not going to happen with the Christians in Iraq. You don't have to worry about them converting to the ISIS ideology. And so I would say that is the easiest thing. That first step is the safe zone for the Christians and the minorities. I really think an independent Kurdistan, despite the diplomatic uproar that would happen, which would go away, would be a strategic move for us. Within Syria, though, we do have some friends. The Syrian Democratic Forces, for example, is led by the Kurds, but it includes increasingly Sunni Arabs. And it has a Christian component that's asking for direct U.S. support. So you have these ethnicities that usually don't get along all coming together to fight ISIS, fight Al-Qaeda, and become open allies with the United States. So there are some things that you can be optimistic about and point to and say that that is really encouraging.
Which prompts this question: what should be the level of American involvement? As we spoke to Mohammed in his situation, Mohammed Alizadeh, we know that there are Americans there in a private capacity. There has been talk that elsewhere in the Middle East that our troops have gone in to train certain groups. Is our involvement, are we getting back active on the ground in Iraq? Do we have a growing presence in Afghanistan? And is that the only way to help these groups?
It's not the only way, but it's an important and essential way, is to have special forces on the ground, to providing them with training, providing them with weapons. You continue to hear these complaints that they're not getting weapons in a timely manner. For instance, in Iraqi Kurdistan, they would often point to the type of equipment that the Iraqi security forces are getting, which are linked to Iran, and it's of a much higher quality than what the Kurds are getting. I mean, that's just absurd to me. But over the long term, what you need is an ideological offensive. And I understand that sounds abstract, but it has to be abstract because you need creative solutions. So a Reaganite strategy that doesn't even involve violence at points to undermine these ideologies, to undermine all these institutions that create the next generation of terrorists, sanction the schools, go after state sponsors of extremism, not just terrorism, the people that set off bombs. But I would have a State Department list that sanctions countries that promote extremism, Islamic extremism, and just adjust to the reality that some of the people that we call our friends are no longer our friends, and wake up to the year 2017.
Well, George Washington said it best: we have no permanent allies, we have no permanent adversaries. Instead, we have permanent interests. And the world continues to change. One constant, sadly, is the danger inherent in what we've seen with terrorism and radical Islamism, if you will. And last question for you, Ryan. About a minute remains. Safe zones, are they the best solution? Because we've seen the influx of so many refugees from the Middle East into Europe, and of course the Obama administration trying to bring so many refugees in the United States. Are safe zones the answer? A minute remains, sir.
100%, but expect it to be a very messy ride to get to that point. So you recently had this agreement between several countries in the region saying we've got these de-conflict zones, essentially safe zones being set up. But then you had the people on the ground engaged in the fighting saying, wait, we just heard about this. We didn't even know about it. So sometimes you hear these proclamations of ceasefires and safe zones that just aren't going to work. And the unfortunate reality is that in a lot of places in Syria, things are going to have to get worse before they get better, as bad as things are. And that involves having the Syrian Democratic Forces, our allies, not just take on ISIS, but eventually they're going to have to take on all these other jihadist forces in Syria until you see peace, or what we can come closest to calling peace anyway.
A reassessment is in order, and Ryan Mauro, the Showman Fellow for the Clarion Project, offers his clarion call and his analysis of what is transpiring with safe zones across the Middle East. Ryan Mauro, we very much appreciate your time on this Friday. We hope you'll come back again real soon. Now, when we come back, with all the strife in the world, a great story. Stay tuned.